be a better start for the Royals. The 3-7 record heading into tonight's game at Wrigley Field matches the worst in the American League. But the season's still young-ish. Hey, it would be a good week for the Royals to show some progress, and especially shortstop Adalberto Mondesi. On today's SportsBeat KC, columnist Sam Mellinger and Vahe Gregorian speak to Mondesi's rough start, and really, fixing Mondesi is as important as anything the team does this year. It's Monday, August 3rd, and I'm Blair Kirchhoff. After a break, Vahe and Sam touch on other topics like the opt-out of Chiefs running back Damien Williams and the different ways sports are handling COVID-19. So let's get started with some Royals talk with Sam and Vahe. Okay, in one of our more unusual arrangements, we have Vahe and I practicing social distancing, and nobody is practicing it more than Sam Mellinger right now, who's working his way back from some very, very well-deserved time off. So, and here's some noise in the background there, Sam.
Oh dear, I'm sorry. That's my life right now. There's always noise in the background, I can tell you.
I think it adds a certain real-world flavor to this that everybody can relate to about now.
Yeah, I believe it's a game of they're playing rocket boats, which means they have like these full bottles of Gatorade, and they think the Gatorade is the fuel. So the boats are very fast when they're full of Gatorade. They slow down after once they start drinking them. I don't know, man. As long as they're happy.
Well, I think you're proving the point that you can do work from anywhere. You don't have to be
testing the limits for sure.
So, Sam, how much Vahe's been out to the Royals a couple times? How much have you kept up with the Royals? Opening 10 games, season's 20% over now.
Right. I've seen enough to see two balls bounce off Royals gloves and over the fence. I've seen enough to see, to appreciate, I should say, Mike Matheny's, sort of, I don't know how to, but the new way that he's handling the bullpen. I think that's something that we have talked to Ned Yost about in the past. And I get that old school approach of, he thinks guys perform better if they know exactly when they're going to go in the game and everything. But I think there's a lot to be said for the way Matheny's doing it, of, using your best guys for certain situations. I've seen enough to know that, look, like I'm not one of these people that thinks it's like you've got to walk like all the time to be productive offensively. I think the Royals have shown that in the past, that they've been really productive offensively without walking. But if you're going to do that, you don't want to average 9.4 strikeouts per game, right? Like you got to pick one or the other. So it's been, look, I haven't been able to watch as much as I will this week and going forward, when you're on vacation, but it's still baseball and you can still turn it on vacation. And, the results have been mixed, I would say. Brady Singer's a bright spot.
Yeah, and the bullpen, not bad. With some nice moments from the bullpen so far. Really like what I've seen from Trevor Rosenthal.
Yeah,
sure.
And the bullpen overall, except for the last 2 days, which, by the way, this is one of the perils of the times in general. You could be watching the game Friday night, let's say. I'm just making up this example, but where you might have thought, well, the Royals have been close in a lot of games, and then by Sunday afternoon, another 10% of the season has been played, and it looks a little different. So, Sam, and the games I've been going to while you've been gone, I've been sort of trying to take more of a macro, for lack of a better term, look, which in these days feels more like it's really not about the games per se, than about, the precarious position we're in and all that. So I don't feel like I've really gotten into writing that much about the real baseball, but your points are well taken. And the other thing that stands out is 14 errors in 10 games. And that's really odd for this group. And it's not like it's a bunch of guys that haven't demonstrated in the past they can apply the leather. So I'm not sure what's going on there. Mondesi's kind of funny because he's just not gotten in any kind of overall rhythm. And this is a kind of a funny thing to say, but I do wonder if in the field, I wonder if the mask is getting in his way. I didn't notice the last game or two if he was still wearing it, but I wonder if there's some visual stuff going on in some way with that. And I'm not saying he should or shouldn't wear the mask in the field. I think you don't have to wear the mask in the field. But anyway, I'm just scatter shooting here.
Yeah, I wonder if there's if a lot of what's going on with him is mental and it's snowballing. And it's weird that they've only, we're doing this on Monday and they played a total of 10 games, which isn't that much, but it's more now than it ever has been. But I look at him, you mentioned 14 errors. He's got 3 of them, right?
I think so.
And he's got that just inexcusable base running blunder. That one was in Detroit, right? The pop out where, anyway, I have to wonder, you can't help but wonder, I think, about whether the stuff at the plate is just kind of snowballing on him. And this was always going to be, and he's taking it out to the field, and he's even, I just don't, if you have a clear head and confidence about you, I don't think you do what he did in Detroit, that base running error. I really don't. And this was always going to be an important season for him. Professionally, it's just, he's 24, turning 25. This is, he's not old yet, but he's not super young either.
Right.
And, this is when you need to start producing. Personally, this is the first year that he's going to be arbitration eligible. So he's got more money at stake now than he has in the past. And I think there was a hope before the season. There's still probably a hope internally that, again, it's only 10 games, but that would be a motivation to sort of, a fresh motivation to really play with an urgency that maybe hasn't always been there in the past. And, maybe what we're seeing in these first 10 games is it's maybe too much of an urgency. Try easier, as George Brett always says. And maybe there's a certain element of he's pressing too much. And I think I look at him, especially at the plate, and I just see a lack of confidence. And it's easy to wonder if that's bleeding out to the field and to the bases.
I don't know if this is true more in baseball than other sports, but it makes me think about this. I feel like there's a genuine time where somebody of that kind of talent in baseball, you really don't know if he's ever going to make good on that talent. You don't quite know if that's going to turn. Whereas in football, after a couple, 3 years, obviously we're still in the middle of the Patrick Mahomes example of that. But I think it's just kind of interesting that baseball plays out so differently than other sports that way.
Well, it's the physical talents, and the Royals have 2 great examples, right? Mondesi and Bubba Starling. Both those guys are freakishly talented, and I think that either one of those guys, they have like NFL player level athleticism, but that doesn't matter. I mean, it matters in baseball. It helps you run, it helps you to have bat speed and power and all that stuff. But hitting is such a specific skill that is owned over thousands of reps, and it requires a mental fortitude to go along with it, to get you through the slumps and to get you through the fact that the best pitchers in the world are throwing 95-mile-an-hour pitches that aren't going straight, and you've got to decide whether to swing and where to swing. It's the hardest thing to do in baseball. I know that's a cliche, but people say it for a reason. And all the physical gifts in the world sometimes don't help you there. I mean, Billy Butler is, should we say, an inferior athlete to Bubba Starling and Mondesi, and he can hit 51 doubles and 21 home runs in a season. So it's just those physical gifts can help, but you still got to be in the box and decide what's a strike and what's not.
Both you guys alluded to some numbers earlier, and I think Mondesi is the person you think of when you talk about a major league leading 14 errors by this team, major league leading 16 walks, major league fewest 16 walks by this team. Only the Marlins and the Cardinals have fewer walks, and for good reason. The Royals have played 10 games, and the Marlins and Cardinals have played 8 between them. And the strikeouts, 94 strikeouts, I think is 6th in Major League Baseball. So those are just applying. So if you're looking for reasons why they're 3-10, which matches the worst record in the American League,
3-7,
3-7, yeah, in 10 games, 3-7. Those numbers really stand out, and I get a sense in watching Mike Matheny on a couple of these Zoom calls that he's pretty frustrated, and
for sure,
and acts, and you hear it in his voice in a different way than maybe Ned Yost would have acted in a similar situation. Ned was just so even keel about everything, but I sense a little bit of the frustration from Mike Matheny when I hear his Zoom calls.
Well, it's interesting. I agree with you. And it's interesting, though, right? I was thinking about this, like, okay, if Mondesi epitomizes the situation, well, you're not going to just say, you're not going to say, well, we're going to sit him until he gets his head together. I mean, that, especially in this kind of weird season, which I think you can make the case this whole season is really just a developmental season anyway. I don't know. I don't know what you would do with that. But, I mean, if that goes on another 3-4 games where there's some kind of disengagement, maybe you need to do something different to get his attention. I don't know what that answer is, but...
Yeah. It's really, I mean, you mentioned those two numbers, Blair. You can be the 94 strikeouts and 16 walks. Like, you can not walk and be productive offensively. You can strike out a lot and be productive offensively. You can't do both.
Right.
And that's the big problem right now. And Mondesi is the most shining example of that. And it's really, what's like a level below crisis? It has the potential to turn into a crisis for Mike Matheny. And all of these things that we've learned about him over the last, year or so, and particularly in the last, 8 months since he got the job, whatever it was, they are, and they will continue to be put to the test with that. I've been so impressed with, there were a bunch of red flags on Mike Matheny coming out of St. Louis. And I've been really impressed with his sort of owning of the mistakes and not just like admitting that or recognizing that, but taking some pretty extreme steps to correct those. And, the self-awareness has been really important. But that's great as far as like trying to solve problems before they happen, and making a list of, I need to talk to this person and this person today, and I need to encourage this one and challenge this one, and this is what I talked to this guy about yesterday, and I'm going to be organized on that. That's great. But what happens when your shortstop, who has an outsized responsibility, I'll use that word, for the franchise's future success, is in this much of a mess? Like, what does Mike Matheny's decision there, when he writes it on his Post-it notes or his list and puts it in his back pocket about like whether to encourage Mondesi or challenge him, like that has to be the right decision. And the way that he can't have Mondesi doing any more of those base running mistakes in Detroit without some sort of consequence, or else the other guys are going to look and be like, well, why is he playing by a different set of rules than the rest of us? And that kind of thing can still. It's a really, I know people are discouraged from watching the Royals when they're 3-7. I get it, but it's a hell of an interesting time to be Mike Matheny and to see how he handles this stuff.
It's funny. There's such a fine line between reasons and excuses for things, right? I mean, every team's got deficits, and COVID's been a factor, but a team that was a bit pitching thin among its starters, having 2 down before the season even started, that's led to, I think it's 7 different guys starting their first 10 games. 20 guys have pitched already. Major League High. So you take that into account, and goofy things like Franco leaving 7 guys on base the other night, which is, I'm not sure how many times that's happened in Major League history. All of which is to say, in a way, they've been close, but then they have these last 2 blowouts, which are a little weird when you get that going after, I think they'd lost 4 games by a total of 5 runs, and the ballad of the loser, I think I learned that from Sam Mellinger, is, we were close. But it's different when you're in a game and you can see 1 or 2 things that change that were the difference in winning or losing. So they've got to get a little juice going here in these next couple of days, or really I think it is going to go off the rails, and that's if there's still baseball being played, it's really going to be a shame, right? There's a lot of reason to be excited about what we think is coming out here. The lineup ought to be potent, or reasonably potent. It's kind of exciting seeing Singer and Bubic up here. I think Matheny is a breath of fresh air. And so to have all that just sort of crumbling right now is really it's just too bad. It doesn't add up to me, actually.
Yeah. And the Ryan O'Hearn, too, he's only played, I think, 6 of the 10 games. He's been encouraging. He's hitting the ball hard. the thing, I don't know, I hope I'm not just like beating a dead horse here, but, with Mondesi, the problem is, I think, amplified with him because the Royals have gone very, obviously we've talked about this plenty, but very in on pitching and specifically starting pitching. And what that means is that the Royals don't have to be right on Brady Singer, right? They don't have to be right on Chris Bubich. They don't have to be right on Daniel Lynch. They need to be right on a lot of those guys, but when you throw a lot of darts, you can miss some. But when you go so heavy on pitching, by definition, you don't go as heavy on position players. And, as encouraged as a lot of us, maybe all of us, have been on Bobby Witt Jr. and what he showed, especially the whatever summer camp or spring training 2.0, they need to be right on those position players. And they don't have to be right on all of them, but they need to be right on a higher percentage than the pitchers. And Mondesi, maybe Witt Jr. is has a higher ceiling. I don't know, but they're close. And they really, if they're right on both those guys, it helps them a lot. If they whiffed on Mondesi, and 2 years ago when we had the, it was a 117 OPS plus, and he was really good before he got hurt. I think he played 75 games. And if that turns out to be sort of the fluke of his career, and what we saw last year, and then 2017, if that stuff is more the rule, then that's baseball is not the kind of sport where one player can make or break, right? Mondesi doesn't play quarterback, and doesn't have the ball in his hands all the time like in basketball. But that would be a big step backward if they're not right about him.
Sam, it's funny you bring that up because I think you might remember this better than I did, and Blair may have looked it up. But remember after Mahomes' first season, I think we both had conversations with Dayton. Maybe you had a more extensive one about him taking Mondesi aside to tell him he can be Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah.
I don't know if that, to go back to your point about how Matheny approaches Mondesi, how much he's a guy that psychologically, encouragement, pressure, whatever these things are, I mean, I don't know what permeates. I guess that's the question for them right now. What reaches him?
And, there's some armchair psychology here, so feel free, everybody listening should feel free to dismiss any portion of this that they want. But the way that Dayton told that story, both publicly and then kind of explaining the context of it a little bit more privately, and the way that, Pedro Grafal, who's sort of been assigned to Mondesi in some ways, the way that these guys and others talk about him, it's always left me with the impression that they're trying to convince him of how good he can be. And that, nobody hits it right on the button, right? Nobody except for Patrick Mahomes and Mike Trout, right? Like there are no perfect athletes, but it's always left me with the impression that they believe that guy needs to believe in himself. And that's why I keep thinking about the 14 strikeouts and 0 walks or whatever it is, like his struggles at the plate, carrying into the field with 3 errors and the base running blunder. I just wonder if that confidence is snowballing the wrong direction. And again, this was always going to be a huge season for him, and a strong start is encouraging and as important as it would have been for him and his, sort of, not self-esteem, that's too strong, but just his confidence as a baseball player is as good as that would have been. I think, it's probably been as bad, the way that it's gone. And you just said it, Vahe. I mean, there was some urgency in the way you put it, like over these next 3 or 4 games. I mean, if he could really use a 2 for 4 with a double and, and a stolen base and a hell of a play in the hole or something like that. I mean, he could really use that tonight, tomorrow, the next day, going forward. He probably needs that as much as anybody.
Well, there's some people I know that know baseball that think the 40-game marker is really is pretty big, and I guess doing the math this year, we're closing in on that right about that time, aren't we?
Yeah, Friday would be the. I think it would be the 14.8th game of the season. Again, in a regular. No, I'm sorry. 40 games would be 40 divided by 62 is the same percentage as 14.8 out of 60. So yeah, you're at that point where teams start to, make judgments about who their who their team is. And I don't know how that translates to, to 60 games, but that's the real stuff. Yeah.
All right. So I jotted some notes down while you guys were talking. We'll go into a break with this. We talked about the team that doesn't walk a lot. The 15 team didn't walk a lot, but they always put the ball in play. That was the marker about the 15 team. Always put the ball in play, didn't strike out a lot. And great to see Jacob Junis back on the mound. I thought he actually pitched well on Sunday. Brad Keller's coming back. And I think this lineup will be better, strengthened, and gain a little confidence with the return of Hunter Dozier as well. I think they're really missing Hunter Dozier. Or at least the Hunter Dozier of last year.
Yeah, good distinction.
Okay, let's take a quick thing. Yeah. Just one more quick point. I looked this up this morning. The Royals, and this probably doesn't surprise anybody, but the Royals are the only team in either league to rank in the bottom 3 in fewest walks and the top 3 in most strikeouts. Everybody else is picking a lane. You're going to walk, you're going to strike out. The Royals are kind of doing both.
All right, let's take a break, and we'll hit Sam and Vahe up on some short subjects. Non-Royals. We'll be right back. Hey, it's Blair. We have a special subscription offer for SportsBeat KC listeners, unlimited digital access to the Kansas City Star's award-winning sports coverage. Sign up now for 1 year of Sports Pass for access to all the sports news, features, and columns presented on the kansascity.com site, and it's only $30. That's a 40% savings off our regular rate. Your subscription will automatically renew after the initial term at $50 unless you tell us to cancel. Your subscription helps support the sports coverage of kansascity.com and the Kansas City Star, and that support has never been more important. Please visit kansascity.com/SportsBeatKC offer to get this special offer. And as always, thanks for listening. Back with Sam Mellinger and Vahe Gregorian. We're talking kind of a little bit of everything here on a Monday. Hey, so Sam, you've been gone. We haven't had a chance to talk to you since the Damien Williams opt-out. And it was, no problem with him doing it. We learned the day after it was announced that mother has stage 4 cancer. In fact, just as we talked about Laurent Duvernay-Tardif opting out for the right reasons, this is absolutely, not that there's a wrong reason, but this is a good reason.
Anybody can understand,
yes,
right?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Chief's going to be okay at running back?
Yeah, I mean, if we're just looking at this at a strictly football point of view, so I think these are like very personal decisions. I don't want to hear anybody criticize a guy for opting in or out. I mean, it's just personal decision, support or whatever. But I mean, that's a position they've got a lot of depth. Damien Williams is a really good player, and I don't know if he's underappreciated in Kansas City. I think he is appreciated around Kansas City, but running backs can be interchangeable. But I think we saw in the Super Bowl, most obviously, but not just in the Super Bowl, but throughout, he's just a really well-rounded guy. I mean, he's got some speed, he's got some power, he can pass protect, he can catch the ball. I mean, he's just he can do kind of everything. He doesn't have like a one simple quality that jumps off the page, right? Like he's he's not the fastest guy in the league, or he's not the strongest, but he's well-rounded enough to kind of do anything. And it's a good time to have drafted Clyde EdwardsHelaire. You know what I mean? It's a good time to have that depth. And I think they'll be fine there. They'll miss him a little bit, but I think they've got enough to make up for it.
Yeah, just to chime in one other point, I mean, one of the things, their strategy's been interesting. It does seem like they've continued on this path of sort of flooding the zone, or creating an embarrassment of riches almost with the skill position guys around Patrick. But this is another one of the reasons you do that, right? You just don't know. I mean, you're always one injury, one complicated year of you're in the life of the world away from what do you do with this. So it seems like it further legitimizes what their strategy's been to keep the line moving that way.
I just think there's a little bit of a concern of the unknown with Clyde EdwardsHelaire when it comes to pass blocking, and
yes.
Because every indication is he can catch the ball out of the backfield. He can do the things that an Andy Reid coached team running back needs to do. Can he pick up the blitzing linebacker?
And can he pick up the blitzing linebacker with far more rudimentary preseason than we've been used to at training camp. I mean, it's just you're going to be playing the Texans, and by the way, this is what you have to do.
Yeah, you don't know until they do it, and I think that this is a big reason why Darwin Thompson, hasn't played as much. But the one thing that you probably want to say is like the Chiefs drafted Darwin Thompson, was like the 4th or 5th round, something like that.
Even later, 5th or 6th.
Okay, yeah, and so you can take a gamble, right, at that point. But my assumption is that the Chiefs would not, no matter what the rest of the tape looks like. My assumption is the Chiefs would not use a first-round pick on a running back that they didn't believe could pass protect. That is the one thing that everybody in that building, from man 53 on up to Clark Hunt, that is one thing that everybody in that building is demanding from that position. So you would assume that he'd be able to do it, but to your guys' point that you just made, you'd probably feel better if you had 4, maybe 3, whatever, preseason games and full practices and stuff for him to work on that.
Don't forget Darrell Williams is there too, and Darrell Williams was serviceable. He ended up being the number 2 back at the end of the regular season in 2018 and into the playoffs. Had a rushing touchdown against the Colts. Serviceable running back with Andy Reid experience. So I think he'll factor into this as well. Hey, how about the idea that no Phase 4 of the NHL startup? And it was announced today, no COVID positive tests. NBA seems to have started up without much of an issue. MLS, after a little bit of problem at the beginning before teams got to Orlando, got its tournament up and going. It didn't have problems once the teams were in Orlando at the MLS's back tournament. Meanwhile, baseball has 2 teams that are just it's been reported. I don't know if I should even put it out there, but heck, it's a podcast. We'll put it out there. Some of the Cardinals went to a casino, is what we're hearing, right? And that's where they got the COVID. And there were some members of the Miami Marlins that went out while they were in Atlanta at an exhibition game. Anyway, did not practice good behavior. And this is the concern, right? I mean, that teams that are in leagues that are in bubbles, with curfews, I mean, they can control their players. Once you get them on the road, it's a crapshoot. And so I think about this for football, for the NFL, and especially for college football in college towns. Should we be concerned?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Sam.
Yeah. No, yeah. I mean, I think so. I think that I continue to think that it's crazy that college football is moving on and planning on playing. Now most leagues are down to conference only, right? Or conference only +1 or whatever. But to me, I draw a line between college and the NFL, and I think that the NFL faces a lot of similar challenges, and everything that we saw with the Marlins and been reported with the Cardinals, like all that stuff can be certainly possible in the NFL when you've got a 53-man roster. So, yeah, I mean, because all it takes is one, right? And I think that one other thing that the NFL might be, a bigger challenge than even Major League Baseball is I think the NFL, I can imagine it spreading quicker in an NFL locker room. I think that Major League Baseball, not just on the field with distancing, but Major League Baseball can stagger training and keep guys separated a little bit better in the clubhouse than I think than the NFL can. I mean, at some point you need all your DBs in a DB room to have a defensive backs meeting. At some point you need the linemen together to talk about stuff. And I just, I don't know that necessarily works on a Zoom call. And I just, it's those kinds of challenges too. It's not just, people think of, the offensive line and the defensive line colliding on every play. And isn't that going to generate spread? And yeah, probably. But there's a lot of other parts of it too. And so, this is as much of a tightrope as Major League Baseball is attempting without a bubble. I do believe that the NFL is, that's even more difficult for sure.
I would just add, it does seem almost self-evident now that the bubble is just an entirely different dynamic and not foolproof, but somewhat close, right? You can, if you're in the bubble, then and your way into the bubble is cleared and etc. The the complications with anything outside the bubble are, I guess, also becoming self-evident. It's not just the X factor of getting on a plane and going into your hotel room. It's also, are you going to make bad decisions, right? So, I mean, things could happen even without making bad decisions. I mean,
They could, but we haven't heard of any COVID case that originated from a plane ride or a hotel stay.
Right, we have, not that we know of.
Right.
So this is sort of my way of getting to that point, I guess. If you sift it right down, it turns out if you don't go to bars and casinos, that maybe it's not a fiasco. And I get that there's people, we've had staff discussions where people really think this should all be shut down. But honestly, if you can implore people to have discipline about how they're handling it, I think you can still have the baseball season. I really do. But how do we know everybody's going to honor their part? I use this term in something I wrote through Danny Duffy's voice yesterday about, he kind of recognizes every one of us is a link in the chain. And it's kind of that simple. He didn't use that term even, but his words were all to that effect. And it seems like it has broader application.
There is the idea that when you're not in a bubble, the temptation to go to a bar, go to a casino, whatever, is going to be higher, obviously, than when you are in the bubble. And there's also the fact, and I guess maybe this is part of what you were just saying about it, but the top soccer leagues in Germany, in England, and in European countries are playing. And if one of their guys, takes the temptation and goes to a bar, goes to a casino, whatever, his chances of contracting the virus and then spreading it are lower than they are here. Just because it's not just about what these leagues do. There's a lot of, it's about what the countries have done.
That's right.
Those places have done a lot better job than we have. So, again, which even, makes the tightrope thinner and makes the safety net even less. So it's just, there's a lot working against these leagues. And, I don't know how much money you'd want to bet on any of them finishing. But, just to roll back to the point I was making in the beginning, I continue to be baffled at how college football is proceeding. Just seems crazy to me.
Well, one last thing about football that I still can't get my arms around at all. All right, plexiglass between lockers with the Chiefs and all these other things and whatever. But college football, okay, are they going to keep them in at night? A. But B, it's the nature of the game itself. I still don't get, you're talking about blood, sweat, tears, saliva, breathing on each other at close range. I get that it's outside most of the time, all that, but the basic nature of the game is a collision of all the very things we're being told not to do.
Yeah.
And
but it's also, I keep coming back to this too, that at least in the NFL, and there are some college programs, Alabama, Ohio State, Michigan Tech, whatever, that have plenty of money to do whatever they want. But there's still a lot of schools like Iowa State, Kansas State, there's more schools like that that might be stretched a little bit to take care of this stuff. But more to the point, they're athletes. In the NFL, these are grown adults, and they're well compensated. And, they are liberated in a way to make informed and independent decisions that is fundamentally not possible for college kids. It's just not. And not to mention there's more information for those NFL players, for the professionals, than there's for college kids. And, again, I get, like, some people listen, they're not a vulnerable population. For the most part, that's true. But there are plenty of college football players who are diabetic that, have had pre-existing conditions or have family members, linemen, weight has something to do with it. So it's just, when you take into account all that stuff, it's just the idea of NFL giving it a try makes sense to me. The idea of college just seems like such a stretch.
We'll see if that Pac-12 movement by the players has any traction. That'll be interesting to follow this week with the Pac-12 players making some demands on safety and health and insurance, other things that not happening in other conferences yet. I can see that spreading. So, and to your point about to Vahe's point about just the nature of football, The NFL is attempting to create masks, face masks that are different. Players can wear gloves, long sleeves. I think there are ways that football players will be able to protect themselves in a COVID world that maybe aren't available in the college game just because of expense. We'll just have to see. So,
yeah.
All right, you guys, great conversation. Enjoyed it thoroughly. Sam, safe travels.
Thank you.
And Vahe, thanks for hanging out.
Yeah, man. Good to see you, Sam.
All right. See you guys in person soon, hopefully.
That'll do it for today. Thanks to our production staff of Derek Donovan, Savannah Smith, Randy Mason, Beth Welsh, Jeff Rosen, and Chris Fickett. Tip of the cap to Sam Mellinger and Vahe Gregorian for talking Royals, Chiefs, and all things Kansas City sports. Links to their columns can be found in the show notes and on kansascity.com. Hey, earlier in the episode, you heard me talk about the Sports Pass offer. It's still a good one, $30 for a year's worth of sports coverage, and that includes the Sports Extra that comes with the e-edition. There are more than 40 additional pages of national sports coverage today. Here's an even better offer. Buy the entire Kansas City Star product. Sports news features, commentary, and analysis, the whole thing. You get all the stories written by my talented colleagues, plus extra news, sports, and business coverage. The details can be found at account.kansascity.com/subscribe. That's account.kansascity.com/subscribe. And whether it's the Sports Pass or the full subscription, you're getting and supporting the best sports and news coverage in Kansas City and helping us produce programs like SportsBeat KC. Thanks for listening. We'll be back on Tuesday with another episode.